Jason, like I was actually, well, we were just BSing before, and we were just talking about actually you're a father. I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, and I'm looking forward to it. So let's start off with why did you write this book?
So it, I didn't plan on writing the book. I never planned on writing the book. But the reason why it happened, and you'll probably appreciate this, is when I got sober, um, it was maybe a couple months in, and my sponsor, I'm a 12-step guy. I believe in all of these pathways of recovery. I do a bunch of them, but it got me sober, a 12-step program, right? So my first sponsor wanted to start taking me through the steps. And his first assignment to me, his step one assignment was he said, write out your drinking history. And I said, "Oh, okay, well, I'm old. But if you're asking me in hindsight why I wrote it or why I'm happy that I wrote it, it's because, you read a lot of memoirs out there like the Matthew Perrys of the world and, Nikki Sixx and all these like rock stars and Hollywood celebrities. And, it's good to read those memoirs because, the experiences are interesting to read about. And, the substance use disorder is substance use disorder, right? But for me, like I needed to identify with someone that had a regular job, who was a dad, who was married and struggling. And, I never went to jail. I never got a DWI. So for me, I was hoping that I could reach, the person that thought that maybe they're going through it alone, and maybe, they think they're a screw up and, they think that they're broken. And I was hoping that me sharing my story is something that would motivate somebody to maybe ask for help, you know?
I had the pleasure of speaking to Jason Mayo, the author of In Case of Emergency, Break Childhood. He is a peer specialist like myself. He is about recovering substance abuse. We have a lot of overlapping feelings about men's mental health. And I got a chance to check out some stuff on Instagram. Just comes off like a great dude, finding out that he's another Sagittarius like myself. As you could tell that this dude has more stuff in the background and is able to show his independent character. How you doing, Jason?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me here. And I just want to say, with the book and everything, I've been listening to and doing a lot of these podcasts, and I've never had a bad experience on any of them. It's always amazing to have these conversations. But when I first heard your podcast, it was you were interviewing Jeff Reynolds,
Hmm.
and I've heard a bunch of his podcasts. We work together, so I pay attention, and I love his book. But the conversation that you had and the questions that you asked were so transparent, and it led to such good conversation. And I think it's because maybe you come from that peer side, that lived experience side, so you look at it a little bit differently. But I just want to tell you, I love the podcast. I love how you approach it, and I think you're talking about really important stuff. So kudos to you. I hope you keep it up.
Thank you, man. It comes from the motivational interviewing. And
Mm,
what I try to do is try to listen to I guess I say the strings of the fabric
yeah.
of what somebody is trying to convey. Because a lot of times their emotions are what they're trying to get out, but a lot of times they get stuck within the words.
Hmm. I like that. Ooh, I want you to therapize me tonight. Can you therapize me? Is that a word?
Ah, it is a word if we both understand it. It's gonna be
Okay.
a good one.
All right.
So, Jason, like I was actually, well, we were just BSing before, and we were just talking about actually you're a father. Um, I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, and I'm looking forward to it. So let's start off with why did you write this book?
So it, I didn't plan on writing the book. I never planned on writing the book. I've always considered myself a writer of sorts. Like I've always loved to write. And since maybe 2008, I've been writing for, different publications and also had my own blogs. So I've been writing short form for a really long time. And, it was either about parenting, fatherhood, and then, as of the last few years, more about addiction and mental health. But the reason why it happened, and you'll probably appreciate this, is when I got sober, um, it was maybe a couple months in, and my sponsor, I'm a 12-step guy. I believe in all of these pathways of recovery. I do a bunch of them, but it got me sober, a 12-step program, right? So my first sponsor wanted to start taking me through the steps. And his first assignment to me, his step one assignment was he said, write out your drinking history. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm old, so that's gonna that might take a little while." And he's like, "No, no, just write whatever comes to mind. How it affected you. A little bit of like where you started, what it led to, how it evolved." I was like, "Okay," and I wrote like 15 pages, right? So it's 15 typed pages. And I wrote it just because of the way I like to write. I wrote it as a narrative, and I wrote it different sections of my life chronologically. And I really dipped into the different time periods. And it almost read like like a memoir, a short essay that, in the form of a memoir. And I wrote it and I read it to him and I put it away. And about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, um, I was going through my hard drive and I saw something that said a Word doc that said drinking history. And, I got sober back in 2010. So I have not looked at this thing since 2010. And I opened it up and read it and it crushed me, because I was reading stuff that was 15 years old, but it was raw, right? Because I wrote that in all the shame, the regret, the remorse, just the anger. I was broken and I wrote it. So it was very, very raw. And it brought back a lot of memories. And for some reason, I just decided to expand on it. So because it was in like this chronological order, like I took like the first part, which was like my parents getting divorced and me like, my world being turned upside down, which led to me not wanting to talk to anybody and all that part of it. And I just started writing about that. And it led to like all these memories and my feelings for my dad and my mom as a single mom and feeling like, not normal because we didn't have money and I lived in a neighborhood that had money and all these things and right up until the day I got sober. And the more I wrote, the more came back to me, because talking to someone is very different than writing because the details come back. And before you knew it, I had like, 20, 30, 40,000 words and I was just like, I guess I'm doing this, and a year went by. I wrote every single day for a year and finally got it done, and it was really, really painful, people are always asking me if it was therapeutic or cathartic, and I'm like, "No, it was horrible." I walked around in a fog for, like, almost a year and not understanding why, Um, but if you're asking me in hindsight why I wrote it or why I'm happy that I wrote it, it's because, you read a lot of memoirs out there like the Matthew Perrys of the world and, Nikki Sixx and all these like rock stars and Hollywood celebrities. And, it's good to read those memoirs because, the experiences are interesting to read about. And, the substance use disorder is substance use disorder, right? But for me, like I needed to identify with someone that had a regular job, who was a dad, who was married and struggling. And, I never went to jail. I never got a DWI. So for me, I was hoping that I could reach, the person that thought that maybe they're going through it alone, and maybe, they think they're a screw up and, they think that they're broken. And I was hoping that me sharing my story is something that would motivate somebody to maybe ask for help, you know? But yeah, it's long-winded, but that was the genesis of it and then what it's kind of turned into.
So it's a start, but I obviously got a bunch of questions
Yeah.
towards this, and yeah, it's not always cathartic when you are bringing up old memories that you thought you put to bed, and then you're really stripping the skeleton dry.
Yeah.
It One of the beauties about you being a peer and even being an author, you're trying to help people see the traps, the pitfalls before it even happens.
Mm.
and you're using the verbiage of where you've been instead of being that rock star of like, "Hey, I'm Kurt Cobain."
Yeah.
Then it's like you kind of immortalize this person. You have this halo effect,
Yeah.
and it doesn't really just hit home the same way of saying, "This average dude having a family," and then all of a sudden, like, "Hey, I gave myself permission to have my own life."
Yeah.
And you're able to come up with the ways of, well, they have these really, really fancy retreats. You gave yourself the permission. So looking back at it, it kind of sounds like it was just a progression of you just being a peer.
Yeah. I mean, this is what was different for me, okay? And, I'm sure you'll understand what I mean by this, but when I've written before, um, or when I've had conversations before with a sponsor or a therapist or a good friend about my experiences, I'm usually talking about things that are on my mind, right? If I go and sit
Mhm,
with my therapist, I'm talking about maybe something that's been bothering me the last couple of months, a situation that I'm having a problem handling, maybe my relationship with my wife or a coworker. I'm not going back and analyzing every bit of my childhood every session, right? We'd probably never get to anything else. So I never, in my 40 something years of 45 years of therapy over the years. I'm 54 and my parents got divorced when I was like 8 or 9, so that's about 45 years of therapy on and off. I don't think I've ever really scraped the surface of my childhood trauma. And as a man, okay, that has, mental health concerns and substance use disorder, my issue was never knowing the problem and never knowing why, okay? So I'm 15 years sober and I still didn't understand who I was. And I
mm,
didn't realize that though. And when I started writing about the childhood stuff, it was the first time that I was ever able to process it as an adult. Okay. I was talking to somebody about this, a couple weeks ago, and the way she explained it to me, she was like, the trauma was perceived through the eyes of a child, and you formed your personality and your coping mechanisms based on your experience as that child with trauma. And it continued on through your adulthood. That's how you still saw the world. And now that you have read about it and thought about it and processed it, it's the first time you're actually processing your trauma as an adult, understanding it. And I was like, that's why I felt like shit for a year. But I really do feel like after all this time, I have a better understanding of who I am, what happened to me, and why I am the way I am. I really do. And it's really because I didn't think of my experience as a kid as trauma. I never did. I wouldn't have said that was trauma, but now I know that was freaking trauma, you know? So that was an awakening for me, you know?
so when I did CPT work, cognitive processing
Mhm.
therapy work, it was sitting in a timeline, like pretty much a 2-hour timeline for 13 weeks. And when you start unlocking, like, okay, this is why I was behaving this way. This is why I was actually creating this scenario. This is the behaviors that came from these emotions. These are the avoidance. One of the things that they don't talk about, well, I really don't remember hearing about this in therapy myself, was, well, when we start having a different relationship with our trauma, how our behaviors are still back on over here.
Mhm.
And how do we actually start course correcting it? It's almost like having a chiropractor trying to readjust your body to be back to being healthy.
Right.
And when you got past that year of writing that book, did you notice any of your other behaviors starting to change as well?
Um, the thing that changed the most is the perception. And, this is gonna sound corny, but I was able, because I understood the experience that I had as a child, in a way, it was the first time I was almost able to, like, let myself off the hook,
Mhm.
right, as a kid, and look at that kid um, from a different point of view as an adult and say, wow, I really have empathy for that kid, you know? And, I didn't develop coping mechanisms, right? I had survival skills.
Mhm.
Okay. And that came in the form of, uh, humor, to distract, drugs and alcohol, isolation. Like that was my coping mechanisms and my survival skills. But looking back on it, you know, you're a vet, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So when I think of trauma, and I think when most people think when they hear the word trauma, they think of a vet coming home from, some sort of battle, right? With PTSD or whatever. They think of a victim of maybe domestic abuse, right? They
Mhm.
think of a parent losing a child, maybe a first responder, somebody, first responder from 9/11. That's what people think of when they think of trauma. And I never allowed myself to, or give myself the space to understand that I had trauma. And what I
Mhm.
learned through this whole experience is that trauma is perceived. If you say it's trauma, then it's trauma. And it could be a singular experience, or it can be an experience that keeps recurring. But, the other thing that I realize now is that trauma never leaves. I'll never get rid of the trauma. It's part of who I am. But what I can do is I can learn to grow around that trauma. My
Hmm.
life can get bigger and bigger around that trauma, even though the trauma is going to always stay the same size. It's my life that's going to get bigger. And I feel like, writing and going through that process, I've seen myself, given myself the ability to, that little part of me that's able to sort of grow out of it now, right? And move
Mhm.
on. Um, but yeah, the trauma thing it's interesting. I don't think people think of trauma, the way I think, trauma really works, right? I think that a lot of people probably have trauma out there and they don't, give themselves the benefit of the doubt. They don't give themselves that, you know, like I said, that space to understand that maybe they do have that trauma. Um,
Yeah, I meet a lot of people, even my brother being one of them. We had an adverse childhood. My dad was a Vietnam vet, and he didn't know how to control his anger, his emotions. So my brother became his whipping post.
mm,
And now he didn't know what love was from a guy that's supposed to love him. And it creates all the adverse events, and he thinks that was normal, or he believed it was normal because that's how his perception was up to that point.
yeah,
And it's like, "Oh, this is just a normal childhood," and at that same time, it's really not a normal childhood.
right,
It's just a childhood that you experienced it. And the thing that I really like what you said. It doesn't change. It doesn't change the trauma, but you're able to go around it. You're able to grow more of you instead of just being consumed based off of this past events.
right,
You start having choices now instead of it directing you.
yeah. And I think understanding it is the big thing, right? So, take substance use disorder, right? I don't know about you, but my wife used to ask me all the time, "How come you can't have just one drink?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know, because who has one drink? I don't, I want more." Like, but I didn't know what the answer was. I wasn't equipped with the knowledge. So, for me, the trauma is very similar, right? How am I supposed to fix something when I don't know what the problem is?
Mhm.
Right? So, I think grief is the same way. I've met
Mhm.
a lot of parents that have lost children to drug related circumstances, overdose, fentanyl, whatever it might be. And, it's really hard to tell somebody that has that type of grief that, don't worry, it's going to get better. It'll get less and less as time goes on. No, no, that grief will always be there and it'll always be the same. But again, a lot of these parents that I've met have turned their pain into power,
Mm.
and pain into purpose. And because they're doing stuff, they're meeting people, they're sharing their experience. That grief's still there, but they're building a life around that grief. And, so trauma, substance use disorder, it's all related. It's all related.
It's taking the fuel of the grief and is transforming it into something else. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And that's not always the way it goes, you know?
And I heard this actually about 2 years ago. Sometimes the trauma that we experience isn't for us, it's to help other people navigate their own. Eh,
Yeah. My favorite so so I write I have the website Sober Not Subtle, right? And it's all it is a platform that amplifies people's voices when it comes to mental health and substance use disorder or addiction, let me say, because it could be, people with food eating disorders, or it could be, I've had people write for the site that tried to kill themselves. Alcohol's not their problem, it's a mental health thing. But before I started the Sober Not Subtle website, I had my own blog.
mm.
And, eventually I was like, I don't want to be the one writing all the time. I'm getting bored of myself. But the name of the blog was called If It Hurts, It Helps. Okay.
Hmm.
And the interpretation of that is exactly what you just said. I always say the most fucked up shit that we go through is always our greatest assets in recovery, helping people. Always. I'm sure I haven't met many people in recovery for mental health or substances or whatever addiction that haven't helped someone because of the stuff that they've went through. Which is what you just said. It's such a true statement, though. Thank God.
It I was having this conversation with my buddy before I served with him my first tour in Iraq, and he was the one that allowed me to go into a psych unit and also go into a residential program for mental health.
Mhm.
And I really valued this dude's perspective, and he had his own battles with mental illness. And when I was talking to him, I was like, dude, I'm scared shitless of them taking away all my clothes, my phone, my wallet, my keys, everything that I can use just to be able to exfil if I need to.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, actually, he said, Fruin, he said, dude, he said, sometimes we need that.
Mm.
Sometimes we need to be away from it. And I was telling him about because I was like, dude, you make an awesome peer.
Mhm.
And he's like, I was like, what a peer does, and this is when people get this mixed up. We're not mini therapists.
No.
We're just people that have had adverse events, adverse parts, and we help people get permission to be able to confront what's going on with them.
Yeah.
We give them because think about like it sounds odd to say, oh, we're helping give their own permission. They're a grown person. They can be able to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But well, that really did help you. This
Right.
isn't just some type of farce. And so yeah, like if it hurts, it helps.
Yeah.
But if it resonates with another person, it's like cool. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm glad that you're able to get on this path. Even if you fall off. Great, man. I hope to see you back on it again.
Right. Well, I think the thing about the peer, and it's great because I don't have many conversations about the peer advocacy thing. So I appreciate this conversation. I think that the difference is because as a peer, I also work a lot with and have relationships with social workers and therapists and psychiatrists. And, I'm all for therapy. I think it should be a part of the toolbox in recovery. There are all these different things. If it's going to help you, then try it. Right.
Mhm.
But, there's something about lived experience, and you're saying given permission. There's one thing for someone to sit down with a therapist, okay, and the therapist say, "It's okay. It's safe. You can talk to me about it." Right? But that's not easy to tell someone who's been holding in trauma for 40 years or whatever it is, and just all of a sudden be like, "Okay, you're the one, let me talk to you." But if you sit in front of somebody and say, you see this person in front of you crying, and all of a sudden you start crying a little bit because you're like, "Man, I don't even know your story yet, but I feel you. And if it make you comfortable, you can ask me some questions too. But let me hear it. It's okay. Like, I'm in recovery." Like, there's just this instant sort of, not always, but there's that instant feeling of trust and comfort that maybe this will be different because maybe they understand, you know? Maybe their story is similar to mine. And, so like I've gotten calls from parents. I don't know about you, but I get calls from parents a bunch that have kids that are struggling and 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever it is, and they're worried and they've tried everything. And more than once, parents have said to me, and I'll paraphrase, but this exact like kind of thing. The parents will say, if I have to take my kid to one more person wearing a cardigan, they're gonna literally run away and never try it again. Because the kid, a 19-year-old kid who's sitting playing Call of Duty in his basement, smoking weed and drinking, like, it doesn't always want to be psychoanalyzed, right? I talked to this one kid who, finally, he was like 18, 19, but his parents finally convinced him to talk to me. I was on the phone with this kid for 45, 50 minutes. I think I said maybe 2 or 3 things, and it was about video games, tattoos, and Jeeps. And that's it. And we had a great conversation because he talked to me longer than he had probably talked to anybody. But it's just like building that trust, I'm not gonna fucking push you to tell me everything at once. That's up to you. I'm just glad you're here talking. You feel comfortable, you know? So, very
Yeah,
different.
it's a very different conversation, and I don't know if you struggled with this. I know I did. I'm like, how the hell are you going to tell me how it is to take somebody's life or how it is to feel this way? You only have a black and white receipt.
Yeah.
You went to school. They told you this is how you're supposed to do, plug in, plug out. So traditionally, I'm a very logical minded person. Math was always my strong suit. And I just remember sitting across from so many people, and there was, like, several therapists that along the way that have been influential in my life.
Mhm.
One was Tara Brunswick. She was my old therapist, she still works at the VA. Apologize if I outed you. I'm the one that's but you're not allowed to say that you know me. Um, but she was the person I called up when I couldn't get into a hospital. So I'm originally from Long Island, New York,
Me too. That's where
and
I am now.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
and,
funny.
so I had my episode in Colorado, and when I was trying to go into a treatment program over there, they're like, "Hey, all of our beds are full. We can't do it." So I had to call her up. I didn't have to. I chose to call her up, and she allowed me to get into a backdoor system with the VA over in Northport.
Mhm. They're great over
Eh,
there, by the way.
they are, and, one of the things that one of the things sorry, my little puppy is being a little bit of a jerk right now.
I love it.
He's finally having his terrible twos right now. It's outstanding. He's been such a good dog for the last 19 months I've had him.
Mine's
Uh,
8, and he's still in the terrible twos, so it might not end. It's okay.
but, it was just interesting about the therapist that you're talking to, and you don't feel like you can connect with them. You don't
Yeah,
feel like they have that same type of understanding. It's just like, "Are you just analyzing me, or are we actually having dialogue?"
right.
And I agree with you about how the peer works. And one of the things I tell people as a peer working for the VA, I say to them, I say, honestly, I'm not a therapist. My job is to convince you to get kicked in the dick over and over again repeatedly.
Yeah.
And you're like, and I'm like, yeah. And you're like, I said, that crying thing that you don't want to do?
Mhm,
I said, you're having a physical response to an emotional reaction. And if you want to actually know something even more, I said, I learned about this is when the tear goes down your face and you could taste it.
mhm.
It allows you to, 1, soothe your skin. 2, you're able to taste the salt. You're able to taste your pain. And they're hearing this from a guy that is like, I'm 6'2", 260, former Marine. I'm not like super gentle with everything. I
Yeah.
wear these type of shirts just to mess with people. But at the same time, it's like, okay, cool. Let's actually get down to dirty. Let's actually get you some help. I'm meeting you with love. And you watching how they go in to see a therapist, and I'm like, "Hey, I just wanna let you know, XY is gonna go talk to you probably about his childhood." She's like, "He hasn't talked to me about this at all." I said, "Nope. I had a conversation with him. He's coming to see you about his therapy,
Mhm.
about his childhood." And she's like, "It was one of the most best conversations I have had."
Yeah. And that's great that you're working with the therapist, like, as a team, and I'm
Mhm,
so glad that the peer movement is growing and growing. It's probably one of the fastest growing, things in behavioral health, I would think, and it's just growing and growing because they're finding their way into different, institutions that used to not have the peers, and they're becoming part of the team of care, and
mhm.
I think that's great, and you know what? Let me tell you, I am not a vet, okay? I've been around vets. I'm not a vet. And but I do know that vets, it is harder to get a vet to trust you than it is to get anyone else to trust you when it comes to opening up to and I know that from talking to vets because we have at the place that I work, we do have a men's group for vets.
Nice.
And
What do you mind sharing? Because maybe some people, or you're not allowed to share that.
Well, I work at a recovery center in Long Island, but it's an in-person meeting. I mean, I can give you information stuff if you want to put it up or whatever, but
Yeah,
I usually don't mention the place, but
okay.
it's a recovery center, it's a community center, and everything's free. You walk in, there's a pool table, there's computers, you play Xbox if you want, you could sit there and lay on the couch if you want. It's just and everybody that works in this place is a peer, so everybody's in recovery, and it's peer led, peer run. There's free coaching there, but we have a vet who came to us because he wanted to start a men's group for vets. And I run a dad's group. I run a dad's group every Tuesday night. I have a dad's recovery group. And it's all types of dads, right? It's not just people with substance use disorder. Like I said, there's one guy who has disordered eating. There's one guy who tried to kill himself. There's all different types of guys, but we have that common bond of recovery. But the vet thing, it seems like it's really, really hard to get, some of these vets to open up. And it's it makes me sad, but we need more people that can specialize in that thing. I think it's a very underserved population. Um, so the fact that you're a peer and a vet, I don't think you probably don't find. I haven't met more than maybe one or two peers that are vets. And I wish you were closer. I don't know where you are now, but I wish you were closer.
So over in the VA, everybody that is a peer working for the VA is a vet.
Hmm.
And one of the things I will share this about how most Army and Marine Corps people, especially guys that go into more of the infantry stuff, especially in the Marine Corps and Army, they have absentee fathers. They
Hmm.
have not understanding about masculinity. They typically have a, and not all, but they have a high percentage of this. And then what you also notice too is that they have decided to build up this character, this persona to be able to, you can't hurt me.
Yeah, of course.
And what it does too, as you probably understand this, it makes you very porcupine-like, where
Hmm.
you're not able to connect with a person, not able to be seen by a person and loved by a person.
Arm's length, always, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so the childhood, to be fair, that's where most of our traumas, almost all of our traumas come from. And we could
Yeah.
say, hey, it happened from war. War was another thing that led us down that route or that road because of, hey, we experienced an adverse childhood. Stop it.
Just bring him on. Just get a chair.
Come here, Z.
What kind of dog
But
is it?
he's considered a double doodle. He's actually usually super, super chill, but for some reason, he just has a hair up his butt today.
Oh,
It's all right, though. Come here, little guy. No, come.
I should get my dog on here. We'll just let them talk.
But this is my little guy.
Oh,
Oh,
he's cute. He's not a little guy. He's a big guy. Because
he's
you're
my
a big
little.
guy and he looks big next to you, so he's got to be a big dog.
He's only about 70 pounds.
Oh, he's cute. Good boy.
But going into this, though, I want to hear more about your perspective of what created the change for you
Mm.
to stop drinking.
Mm. I mean, my bottom. I mean, I think a lot of people have multiple bottoms. I had a lot of bottoms. If you're thinking about, how it affected me from my drinking, but my bottoms were emotional. Like they were
Mm,
really emotional, and because it came to that point where that, you know, the two things, the mental health and the drinking and drugging were starting to intersect. And I finally started to understand that it's not just one or the other, it's both, which can be deadly. And, I've always lived with depression and anxiety. I still do. I'm on medication. I thank God for medication because it gives me a chance to like get up in the morning, start with a semi even keel, and then it's up to me to sort of take care of myself for the rest of the day. You know, it's there was a time I didn't want to get out of bed at all. I didn't know why. But for me, it was really just feeling so broken that I would look myself in the mirror and I would say, "What the fuck is wrong with you? You have 2 beautiful daughters." They were 7 and 3 at the time, right before I stopped. You 2 beautiful daughters that love you, a wife that cares so much about you. I owned my own company at the time, and I had, employees that, were great, and the work was great and all these things. I mean, it was killing me, but, on the outside, everything's I had a house, I had all this stuff, and I was miserable, and I did not know why. And I tried self-help books, I tried therapy, I tried going to the gym, meditation, whatever it was, and I could not stop. I could not stop drinking, I could not stop drugging, I could not stop feeling like shit. And it just got to the point where I just wanted to fucking kill myself. Because I start to wonder like what it would be like if I disappeared. Would my kids miss me? Would my wife care? Like all these things. And I just, I had a perspective shift. All right. And I know the common term is moment of clarity, I guess. But my disease of substance use disorder, because it is a disease, it's a mental condition and a physical condition. My disease is a disease of perspective, is what I learned very early on, right? So, if I wake up in the morning, I could see something one way, and I could wake up the next morning, it'll be exactly the same, but I could see it another way. And I just got to a point where I just said, like, I can't live like this anymore. I don't know how I'm gonna live, but I need to do something. And I decided to ask for help. And in all the bottoms that I had, and I never went to an AA meeting or anything like that. I almost wasn't aware of it, but there came a moment where I started to see how it was affecting my family, and I started to perceive, the look from my wife. Instead of "you're an idiot," it was like "you're pathetic." You know, I started to. It was almost like I was looking outside of myself and saying, "Wow, you are really screwing this up." You need to at least try to ask for some help. And I remember my wife and I were in marriage counseling at the time, and I asked her if I can go see the marriage counselor on my own, which was like, that was not something that I would normally do or want to do. And she said, "Sure," and I went, and for the first time, like ever, I broke down. Like I lost it. And I was like, I can't stop drinking, I can't stop doing drugs, and I want to kill myself and I don't know why. And just bawling, you know? And that opened up something in me, like you said, permission, right? I finally gave myself permission. And it was desperation because it was a Hail Mary, right? That's what it really was. And she said to me, she said, "It sounds like you've been self-medicating for a very long time.
mm,
I want you to see a psychiatrist and get a consultation because, you know, you can keep self-medicating, or you can see someone. Maybe you can actually get some actual medication to help you. If you have depression or anxiety, bipolar, whatever it might be, please go see someone. Give yourself a chance to find out." And she said, "And I want you to go to an AA meeting to try it."
mm,
And nobody had ever said that really to me before. My brother said it to me once before. And I was like, you know what? Again, my perspective shifted. Like I was just like, I will do freaking anything anyone tells me, because that's how desperate I was. I just so I went to see a psychiatrist, and wouldn't you know it, like I got put on meds and I went to an AA meeting. I found an AA meeting, and you know, the first meeting that I went to, just the feeling of like this might be the thing that helps me. Like, I've never really had a feeling that I, like, sat there and my shoulders just kinda collapsed, and I started crying. I was like, "Wow, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I have a feeling about this," you
Hmm.
know? And it was because of people, the people. I identified with people, and I felt loved by people for no other reason that they just wanted to know who I was, and they felt for me,
Hmm.
and that changed everything, and I don't know what I would have done if I didn't choose to see that therapist that night. I don't know, but I had that moment where I was like, I need to do something and give myself a chance. And I've probably had the opportunity like that 1,000 times before, but my
Hmm.
perspective was different. And for some reason, it all lined up, and I allowed myself to ask for help, and I don't think a lot of people don't ever get there, and as a peer, it's frustrating because you now that you can do it, like, and you can't push somebody, but like, I talk to people, I'm like, oh my god, they don't know that they can actually do it. Like, it's not easy, but, like, please, you can do it, I swear to, but it's hard to, you can't sit there and, like, beg someone to go get help because everybody's got their own journey. But perspective for me is really, I think, what made me stop. I had that gift
Hmm.
of that perspective shift,
It's so crazy, man. Mine was it was so January 14th of 21, when I almost ended my life. I was drunk. I thought my ex was flirting with a dude, and she wasn't. It was just really perception, rock bottom.
Mhm,
I woke up on the end of a barrel of a shotgun, and I got a call from the police, which my sister called called the police, let her know that her brother is, like, feeling a little bit not even a little bit, is feeling
yeah,
suicidal. My ex tried to go find me. She was drunk. The roads were icy. It was over in Colorado, and, it was actually an occupational therapist that really helped me look at it a little bit differently. And this is when I was like, because I went into the psych ward on my own. They actually allowed me to just hand over my firearms and allowed me to actually admit myself.
mhm,
And the occupational therapist, she comes out with this bucket of rocks and balls. And she's like, "Hey, tell me what's wrong." Puts one in my hand.
hmm,
"Tell me what's wrong." Here, puts another thing in my hand. So I got some decent sized mitts, and then she's like, and I'm like, "All right, I can hold so much of this." And what she was waiting for was that drop.
yeah,
One of them to drop out. And she said to me, she's like, "Why didn't you ask me to hold on to it? Well, why didn't you ask me to put one down for you?
yeah,
I didn't know it was an option."
yeah. It's amazing that she's like, "You here, see it. This is literally what's happening." That's amazing. What a great fucking technique, and for her to know that that's what it might take for a guy like you, right?
Yeah. And Dr. David Gately, he works over at the VA, and that dude, why I trusted him. So I'm in one of those sessions with him, we're talking, and something came up about Vietnam vets. And I said, your voice inflection changed? You
Mhm,
actually, I called him out on it. And because most of the time he was just very monotone. And I can honestly tell you, you can just see that he cared. He
mhm,
cared about his job. I wasn't just another warm body walking in. He was like, "Hey, I got you." And that dude, he kicked my ass so good.
mhm,
And but yeah, like, I hear what you're saying, and we have these aha moments,
yeah,
but what's interesting too is that how many times have you had these aha moments and you were just like, "Nah, I got
Yeah.
work in the morning. Nah, I gotta go do this."
Yeah, these little, like, you hear about people talk about, like, there are no coincidences, right? And, again, like, things that I look at now that I'm like, "Oh my god, that's a sign." How many times have you seen the same rainbow pop up when something, it's like,
Yeah.
it's happened a million times. Now you're just looking at it with a new set of glasses, It's the same. And again, that perspective. Let me ask you a question. So, as a peer,
Mhm.
so I've been doing it, it's almost 3 years now, and the first 6 months that I was a peer, right? The first 6 to 8 months, I almost had a nervous breakdown, okay? There was some countertransference. I was dealing and talking to people, and, I've been sober for a while, but I was picking scabs that I haven't picked before, and it's very different than going to a 12-step meeting or dealing with, as a sponsor, what it's very, very different, There's a lot more listening, right? And I found myself slowly but surely, I started to have these mini panic attacks. And I wasn't aware that it was happening. I'd be in my car, I'd start crying for no reason. No reason. Like, a song would come on, or I would just have a thought. And it got to the point where I wound up having this massive panic attack, and it turned into a manic episode.
Hmm.
And I was on the phone with an intake, at a hospital in New Jersey. I was gonna check myself into a psych ward at 13 years sober as a
Mhm.
peer, and because I did not have the experience or the awareness to understand that, like, self-care is a thing, and I probably needed to up my game a little bit, and I was so into it and so, like, so in the moment with everybody that I wasn't taking care of myself, and I almost lost my shit, and it was a huge lesson for me about self-care. And, like, what I didn't realize is that I have my recovery at work, and then I have my own recovery. And
Mhm.
for me, the two were mixed together, and I started to lose sight of my own recovery, and it became dependent on other people, and it almost took me out. I didn't want to drink. Not once did I want to drink, but I thought I was losing my mind. Like, it was scary, very scary.
So, what I'm also hearing too is that, like, dude, your pride got in the way because you're like, "Hey, I'm a peer. I should be
Mm,
able to handle this." And I'll so probably within the first 3 months working there, right? So I started actually, it's about to be 3 years in about 2 weeks. I've been working at the VA as a peer specialist.
nice. That's awesome.
And, so about 3 weeks into it, one therapist is going to go do his clinical supervision hours, and he's getting so he goes over to I'm seeing my supervisor, he comes up, and you can just see this guy's upset. And I'm like, "Shit, what did I do? What did I do?" And I had my mind and I'm like, "Oh, this is you right now having a triggered response based off of needing to always be perfect."
Yeah.
But I will say, which is weird to say, is that, when I've been working as a peer, it's been more of like, "Shit, am I gonna screw somebody up?
Ugh,
Eh, am I actually gonna be okay? Am I okay to say this?" Or if they come at you with left field, like I had a guy, he was molested as a kid and he was molested while he was in the service.
mm,
And he just starts exposing everything. And I tell him, I say, "Hey, I understand that you want to have this release right now. But the problem is that I'm not going to be taking any of this on. And I know that you want to get this off your chest, but I honestly am not trained enough for you to be able to go through this with
yeah,
me.
yeah,
I'm not rejecting you as a person. I am protecting you from fully exposing yourself." And when I say that is because one of the things I've learned, if we are not ready to listen to their story, or we are not geared enough, our micro, like our reactions might give them something else and then they're going to be rejected.
mm,
Or they're not being met with love. It's like, whoa, I could finally get this off my chest. And it's like, I want you to. I really, really do.
yeah.
but do you have the skills to self-soothe when you actually get through this? Are you going to wanna go back to substance abuse? Are you going to wanna go back to self-harm? And asking a person before they actually get too invested into the moment, because it's like it could be overwhelming because 'cause you're having somebody be extremely vulnerable, extremely raw, wants to be really fully seen, and then all of a sudden it's
Yeah.
like, I tell you right now, the ones that actually hurt me the most are the ones that wanna share about being molested as a kid, and what
Mhm.
I've done on my own due diligence is I started reading about this. I started reading about MST, which is military sexual trauma.
Mhm.
I started reading about why did people start to wanna be perpetrate like, why do they wanna prey on kids? Things I find so grotesque.
Yeah.
I find myself, "Alright, I can't go away from this." Like, I can't keep saying no. I want to understand so that when you do come to me with a problem,
Right.
I could be able to help you breathe through it. I can help you be able to be met with love instead of saying no. Because I started noticing that anxiousness where you were speaking about.
Yeah.
But when they talk to me about combat, cool. Got you all day, bud. But
Yeah.
most of the time it's just like what I realized too is that a lot of these guys that I interact with, they want to be seen. They want to be seen while not wearing the mask. And I don't know about yourself, but I know myself for many years. I used to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And wearing that mask, I was like just rejecting part of myself before somebody else could. And they wanted to finally be able to say, it's okay, dude. Halloween doesn't need to be 365 days a year.
Yeah.
It's okay, man. It's okay to be that vulnerable young person.
Yeah. So were you always I don't want to turn the turn around me starting to bring you, but were you always the type of person that was good talking with people? Just in general, were you always a good listener? Because, you know, it's for someone who came from where you came from with the experience you had, and now all of a sudden you're an open book. Like sometimes it's so crazy to think that we go through a lifetime of not telling anybody anything. And now all of a sudden, because you're recovering out loud, I'm recovering out loud. It's very different than, going to a meeting and just going about your business and nobody really knows what's going. Like we're putting it all out there. Like it's weird to think that so a guy like you who held it all in and this big tough exterior is now doing a podcast talking about men's mental health, sitting down with people, giving them the permission to cry and cry with them, maybe, it's like, how did you get here? Right? Do you ever ask yourself, like, how did I get here? And why did it take so long?
I know exactly how I landed up here, to be honest with you, Jason. Is that when I was about 2 to 3 weeks about to leave the hospital, and I knew I was about to leave, and I'm like, okay, it's how am I gonna tell people what have you been doing? What do you do for work? Well, I just
Mhm.
got out of a hospital. Like, I just got out of a residential program. I was like, I got the concept of radical rejection. I am going to tell you who I am. I'm done wearing a mask. And when I started to give myself the permission and gave myself the power of saying, I want you to know who I am. If you want to get to know me deeper, great. If you don't, that's outstanding. I don't want to make sure that I'm this person for you and then all of a sudden depriving myself the ability to breathe. And when I came through that perspective, it changed me. And then there was another book. So when I learned, I don't learn just very linear. I learn in a multitude of different directions. It was called Chasing Failure by Ryan Leake.
Mhm.
And I realized that if I wanted to have a better life, what I needed to do was fail epically at a lot of things. And that's when I started to be open about stuff. And when I realized if I give you me and I open myself up to you, I have actually been met more with love and understanding. And I have actually my brother that It was very like, this was kind of like foo-foo stuff for him. He's doing exactly what I wanted this podcast to do,
Mm.
which is, let's have conversations. And he had told me, he's like, "Man, I was at my buddy, Andrew's house, and it was like a few of us there, and we started talking about mental health because your podcast came up." And I was like, "Alright, I won. I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do." So
Starting a conversation.
exactly, that's all I wanna do with people is start a
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. The conversation that everybody, needs to be having, but they're too scared to start. I mean, I say that, like, so when I'm at my dad meeting, all right, which is small, it's like 8, 10 guys, whatever. And we know each other well now. We call each other on our shit, and or I take a meeting into the local jail every other week. And, I sit there with 30, 40 guys, like they come out of their cells, we have a meeting for an hour. I'll say to them, I say, guys, just think about this for a second. Like, this is a privilege for me. I don't know if it is for you to sit with a bunch of guys coming from different places, different backgrounds, different experiences, and being able to talk about real fucking shit for an
Mhm,
hour, cry, be vulnerable, laugh, trust each other, like to talk about the stuff that nobody ever wants to talk about. And the only reason why we get to do that is because of where we've been.
mhm.
Right? Because and I go, it amazes me because you walk out into the street, into the real world, and that doesn't happen all the time. You don't wind up at a bar, with your buddies when you're drinking, talking about crying and mental health for an hour. You're talking about other shit.
Yep.
So the fact that we are where we are because of the shit that we've gone through, and it affords us the opportunity now to have these privileged conversations with people that we wouldn't have otherwise maybe even sat with ever and talk about the real stuff, that's where the magic is. Like, that's where the reward is, right? Like, I'm lucky. I'm so lucky that I'm, an alcoholic addict, whatever that I'm, have mental health. It's like, I'm so lucky because if I didn't, I wouldn't have found these ways to live my life. I'm so lucky to have had that experience because you don't have to be, um, someone with substance use disorder or mental health to still be miserable.
Mhm.
Like I had an opportunity to learn from people, different ways to help myself, to live, to have a good life, to be happy that I otherwise wouldn't have found out or had the opportunity to talk to people about unless I was so fucked up, you know? Right? The
Uh,
gratitude in that of being fucked up. Thank God.
it's like because what happens, what I noticed, and I've actually thought about this a lot. We go to a bar, we get drunk, we're able to get into a quicker conversation, but it's like a glass bottom.
Mhm.
You can't get too deep
Right.
because that social lubricant allows you just to be like, "Blah,"
Yeah.
but you're not able to really convey your emotions super clearly.
Right.
But when you're able to sit with your boys or sit with people that genuinely care, it's like, holy shit.
Mm.
It's like, you know, I thank you so much, Tom, for sitting there and listening to me be able to talk. And it's more of a privilege just to be able to hear somebody be this vulnerable because most of the time is, "Hey, Jason, how you doing? I'm good.
Yeah.
How you doing, Will? Oh, checking the boxes."
Yeah. Yeah. There's a part in the book that, talks about, you know, people asking you, like, how are you? And I'm fine, right? And I'm okay. And it's just the whole notion behind, like, ask me again, right? You ask me once, I say I'm okay, but I'm not fucking okay. Please make it okay. Please ask me one more time. A lot of people don't ask again. And that's my whole life was, are you okay? I'm fine. The first part of the book is called I'm fine. It's like, it it's different. Like, to know that you can ask somebody twice. When I talk to kids, we talk about mental health a lot when I go to schools and stuff like that. And the first thing I say, it's 200 kids in the room. I say, how many people here know someone that struggles or that's struggling? Either they drink too much, they smoke too much, or you think they're depressed. How many people know somebody, a cousin, a friend, a mother, father, someone on your, football team? How many hands go up? Everyone. And then
Mhm.
I say, okay, now, how many people in this room struggle with depression or anxiety, or maybe think that maybe they drink a little bit too much to cope? Or how many hands go up? Zero. And I'm like, this can't be accurate. There's got to be someone here. But this is the problem. And this, the stigma is everybody is afraid to speak up. And granted, it's hard to speak up in a room of 200 of your peers, but that's typical, right? And somebody's going to say, "Are you okay?" And that kid's going to say, "I'm fine. I'm fine." But if they're anything like me, I was thinking, "I'm not fine. I'm not fine. I want to say I'm not fine, but I can't. For some reason I can't say I'm not fine. I don't know. It's not coming out of my mouth, even though with every fiber of my being, I want to say I'm not fine, you know?
Because if you open up and you say, "I'm not fine," and somebody shuts the door in your face,
Yeah.
the fear of rejection is so hard.
Yeah. Or even worse, they say, "Talk to me about it. I'm listening." Then you actually have to face it, right? And then you
Yeah,
actually have to let people in, and maybe they'll know that I'm broken now, you know? Like, I don't know, there's a part in the literature, in the, 12 steps, the program, the Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, there's the person that you are, and there's the person that you want people to think that you are.
mhm.
And I lived my whole life as the person I wanted people to think that I was. I didn't even know who I was when I got sober. I had no idea. It took me, you know, 50 something years to find this profession, right? Like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't allow myself, you know?
Yeah, it's it's what's a topic that we don't normally talk about, and I'm looking forward to actually getting somebody on here, is a spouse or family member of how they are not trying to trip us up to go back to that familiar pattern, even though
Mhm,
they don't like it, trying to watch us heal.
mhm.
Because you've been with you said your wife for 38 years, right?
32 years, yeah,
32 years. You've been sober for 15.
yeah.
You coming on the halfway point of marriage of being sober.
Mhm, yeah.
Think about, like, if you were able to this is a screwdriver, man,
Ah, I love it.
think about how your wife was when you first started getting sober and, "Hey, I'm gonna be going to these meetings. I'm
Yeah,
gonna be going to these stuff.
yeah,
How are you gonna handle this?" And, like, how does she connect with it?
yeah,
But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult because when we healing, we'll talk a lot about us, but now we're being radioactive to everybody else because now Jason's not so familiar.
yeah,
Jason is healing. What happens if I don't like Jason when he's healing? What happens if Jason doesn't like me when I'm healing,
yeah.
when he's healed? And it creates this whole other, like, this change. It's
Also
very fascinating.
roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, roles and purpose, like, it's really important for someone to have a role in a relationship, right? Or on a team, right? It's really important. And when somebody in the relationship makes a change, like when I got sober, my wife's role primarily was holding the family together. Driving because I could never drive because I was always drunk. Um, you know, Cleaning up after my mess and making excuses because I couldn't go out because I didn't want to go out because I was holed up in bed because I didn't want to get out from under the covers. Get
Mhm.
the kids ready to school because I was either too hungover or I didn't come home that morning. And all of a sudden I'm up, I'm getting the kids ready, I'm driving us, to and from dinner. I'm responsible, I'm coming home on time. And now what? Where does that leave her? Like, it's great that I'm responsible, I'm helping, and on the outside, it should be like, "Oh, well, thank God, he's finally pulling his weight." But now, like, who is she in this relationship now?
Mhm.
It's we and we've talked about this, like, we've been together for a long time, but when I got sober, we didn't start from scratch, right? Like, there's something there, right? We've known each other for a very long time, but in reality, we're building that relationship again.
Mm.
And people heal at different times. That's you're right about that. It's hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah, it is super freaking difficult, and you just meeting these people with love. But I know that you wanted to first you wanted to talk about your book a little bit more,
Mhm,
and then also talk a little bit about your what you've been doing on your site.
mhm.
We're about the hour into the conversation, and I know I just somebody was telling me, "Hey, try to keep it about an hour so it's an easier thing to listen to." And
That's
I'm like, "Ah."
editing if you want.
But, honestly, this is the first time I've done a YouTube live.
Yeah.
So, I had 2 people come in and out, and one person was saying, "Thank you for your support position and your conversations and confronting people to get help."
Oh, shit, are we live on YouTube right now?
Yeah, we
Oh
are. I
oh,
didn't
I
even
didn't know
realize
that.
that
I
I
didn't know
didn't
that.
know
That's
it was.
awesome. I would've told
I
I would've told people to come watch. I had no idea. Damn, you should
Dude,
tell me.
I had no idea that we were live.
You
I
should
didn't even know it.
That's
Even though the
great.
thing is just live up there, but yeah, but tell me about the book, and tell me a little bit also about the webpage too.
Well, so the webpage, first the webpage is, wait, so I see chat messages. Is that because people are actually trying to chat, or that's just something different? That's maybe
No,
something different.
somebody did chat about a half hour ago, actually 40 minutes ago.
Oh, wow, there's public chat. Jeez, okay.
Yeah.
Damn, alright. The website, The Sober Not Subtle, is I think it's been great, right? So I think we're about 150 something posts in to the site now. And, at first it was just me writing pieces on, my recovery and little anecdotes about things and perspective stuff. And now, like, we have social workers that write for it. We have people in recovery for all different types of things. I've had people that write articles that have lost loved ones. I've had a playwright write an article. It's like you name it, and people have written for the site. People that have had loved ones that have, completed suicide, like it. And then there are articles about like how to stay sober for the holidays, or how to manage stress, or an article about meditation. And so it's turned into like this little destination that people can go for, not only to hear people's stories and try to relate, but also for resources. There's resources on there. I have to add your podcast to the podcast section too. There's different podcasts. There's information about how to be a peer. There's a whole bunch of different stuff on there, and I encourage people to send in their story or anything that they want to write about. It's to sober not so just check out sobernotsubtle.com. And again, I want you. I don't think I had one person that was a vet write an article, one person so far. So I would love to get that perspective from you if that's okay. Like, or you could write about whatever you want, obviously. You could write about starting this podcast. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so the Sober Not Subtle has been really a nice experience for me. It's more work than I ever thought it was going to be, but it's been a great experience, and there's been no shortage of people sending stuff in. So that's been great. And it's also been nice for, and helpful with the book too, because it gives me a platform to, expose the book on, and to, make it like a little bit of a landing page for, people that might not have found the book otherwise, that maybe have found the site. Um, and the book, I mean, like when I first wrote it, I had a friend of mine, like that we had early readers. So I had about 85 people reading the book before I released it, just to get feedback and hopefully people, create some buzz, some early reviews, things like that. And most of the people that were reading the book early were not people in recovery. They were just, normies, so whatever you want to call them, right? And, one person who's a friend of mine, a friend of ours, my wife and I, she said to me, she read the book. I said, "What did you think?" She said, "It was good." I was like, "Okay, well, that's it?" She's like, "Who's going to read it?" I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "If you're not if you're not sober or you don't have like like why would someone want to read this if they're not in recovery?" And
Hmm.
I was like, for a second, I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't really think about that." But it's like the real thing and the real reward so far is most of the people that I've heard from that have read the book are not in recovery. And I think that it started conversations about recovery and mental health and people that don't understand the disease. Um, I did a reading, and there's like about 50 people at the reading, and afterwards we opened it up for questions. And one of the first questions was from someone who, and if there were 50 people, 40 people that weren't in recovery that were in the room, and somebody was like, "Why didn't you just stop drinking?" That was the question, and I was like, thank you for asking that. That's actually a really freaking good question. It sounds simple, but it's a really good question. So, it's been well received, and it's the best feedback that I've gotten have been from people reaching out that are not in recovery, that have found it helpful to, see what somebody goes through that might be living with depression or anxiety or addiction, and that they're not aware of the signs or how bad it can get. So that's been it. I found that it's reached a whole bunch of people, and it's like, honestly, and if you want, it's like, it's funny, it's emotional, it's painful, but there are a lot of laughs in here. And I don't think you're quite Generation X, right? You probably just missed it by a few years, if
Yeah.
you're 40 something. But there's a lot of, if you grew up in the 80s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, there's a lot of pop culture references to all that stuff in here. So it's a fun read in that regard too. But yeah, I hope people continue to buy the book. It's been really nice so far having conversations about it with people that are reached out, people that I don't know, people that I know. It's been rewarding, you know.
So, Jason, have you ever had the conversations of saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go live. Let's have a conversations about being sober or questions about sober curious people, or how does that look?" Because there being sober curious to some people is frightening because you're gonna lose a lot of your acquaintances or your friends or relationships while you're navigating that. Have you ever actually had that out there where like, "Hey, I'm gonna meet up once every other week,
Mhm.
hop on, ask questions, please do."
I rarely have done that, but when I before I was releasing the book, when I was trying to get some buzz going and putting the word out there, I do have quite a few people that follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn and social media from. I used to write a dad blog, so I had a little bit of a platform already. So when the book was about ready to come out, I did a few Facebook lives where just to talk about the book, answer questions, and it was actually really, really nice. And I haven't done one in probably about a month and a half, but now that you say that, it was good. It was helpful. Um, and I'll give a shout out to, I write for a website called the Sober Curator. So if you go to thesobercurator.com, it's
Hmm.
actually a sober lifestyle magazine, basically. And there's reviews of non-alcoholic beers and movies or TV shows that have to do with sobriety. There's different columns about health and wellness or about lifestyle. It's like TMZ and People Magazine also, but for sober people. But it also is really good for sober curious people. We talk to a lot of issues and a lot of things around being sober curious. So if anybody out there is sober curious, a good place to start would be checking out the sobercurator.com. It's a really, really great resource. You should check it out too.
I will. So I found out who's actually been telling people. So there's a colleague of mine. She was telling people that, hey, that we're on. And I just asked the chat. There's only 3 people on right now in the
Mhm.
chat, which is, I don't say only, but thank you guys for being on. if they had any questions for you. So there might be a couple questions that might come about it.
Yes, I play guitar, and yes, I'm horrible. I can play the same 3 songs I've played since I'm 13, so if that is a question, that's what the answer is right there. Man, I'm so sad that I didn't know that we were live. I woulda told everybody. I woulda put it out there. We
No,
gotta do this again eventually and go
I
live.
w- I would love that, man. I also have another dude that you might actually enjoy chatting it up with.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you know about psychedelic research, but I have a guy that he ministers it in a coaching aspect, and you two would be two peas in a pod.
Yeah. There's an
Yeah.
article on Sober Not Subtle about someone who is, I guess, a psychedelic guide, somebody
Mhm.
that does the guided, experiences. So, it's and that's I mean, that's a hot topic out there too, like, 'cause that's a lot of people that are sober might say, "Well, that's not sober," and, there's not a ton of research out there yet that's proven that it's helpful for trauma, but there are studies that say that it is. So I don't know. I find that stuff. It's not something that I would do, but it's definitely something that's interesting.
So the thing I've heard about ibogaine has actually helped out, especially with ibogaine mixed with DMT,
Mhm,
of how it actually helps restore the brain from the trauma. And it actually cuts it's in the high 80%, they're doing the ibogaine then followed by the DMT to quit drinking. And it has like an 83 to 88% success rate on the first administration.
mhm.
Second time goes up into the 90s. So a friend of mine, Chelsea, asked, has anyone said the book is life changing?
Um, I mean, there's a bunch of reviews on Amazon, and a lot of them talk about what the book did for them experience wise. Um, I've had a lot of people reach out to me that I don't know. I've had a lot of people reach out to me from the industry that I used to be in for 30 years, that are either just got sober, have been sober, lost a relative to overdose, like people that we never would have had these conversations. And I've talked about this before. There's a couple of days after the book came out, I got a private message on Facebook from a woman who, and I was upstate with my mom and my wife for the weekend. We just took my mom upstate, and we were shopping in this little general store, shopping whatever place, and I got this DM from a woman who had just read the book, and she said, "I want to give your mom a hug." And she said, "I'm a single mom and I'm going through something very similar to what your mom went through, and I can really relate." And that was the first time, like, because my mom, when she read the book, she's like, "Uh-oh, like, we're airing like our dirty laundry. Like, is this going to be bad?" Is like, it was the first time I think my mom realized that her experience is might inspire people, and that sort of like changed her perspective of like the book and it being a good thing. So yeah, I think it's affected some people. I think identification is a huge thing for healing, and I think so far a bunch of people have been able to identify, so that's a good thing.
He is way more loud than he normally is. I think it's because I need to run him, but I
Yeah,
can't run him tonight.
I didn't mind,
But
it's fine. I like it, it's
no,
very real.
honestly, some of the conversations I get into, and I could tell that you have learned how to navigate your story quite well, is that sometimes we'll get into some darker stuff.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I do with people is that, hey, I don't want to direct the conversation fully. I want to be able to help with it, navigate it. But because the other part to it is, if this agitates a person to change, great. Because everybody's story is going to create a different narrative, a different way of understanding it. Even if you and I were both expressing the same type of language, of how you're going to give it compared to how I give it
Mhm.
is going to resonate differently.
Right.
And if I try to funnel all of us into one way of thinking, it's going to stunt the opportunity of connection.
Hmm.
And like I'll tell you about some of the people I've had on here where there was this woman, she's a social worker that lives over in Colorado, and she was a teacher over in Brazil. way before she moved out here, and I didn't realize how much the childhood and how much, like, we are not curious about kids and their mindsets. So that's one of the things that I would like to do and is help different people have ways to look at the same type of problem and maybe a multitude on it. Like you brought up Jeff Reynolds.
Mhm.
Jeff Reynolds, guy's a stud.
Dude is
Iron Man.
amazing. He's such a good guy. So smart, so
Yeah.
real. Yeah.
And yeah, even when I was talking to him, I noticed that his like his body just relaxed during the conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like super privileged to have that type of dialogue.
Yeah. Well, I think it's
But
freeing to tell your story. I mean,
yeah,
and he didn't have an easy story, you know? Beating cancer twice is, I mean, that takes a lot out of you. And to be able to like share about it, because there are so many people that go through that and are so scared and don't know what to do or where to go or how to feel. And I read that book, in a few days when it first came out. It was a great freaking book. And I know Jeff from work, and it was so good to get to know that part of him that I had no idea about. So, yeah, I mean, listen, just telling your story is healing and healing for other people. You never know who's going to read it.
but we'll link up again sometime and we'll
Let's
do
do it.
this. And if you don't mind, just DM me your website and I'll make sure that I write something up for you, man.
Don't be one of those guys that says they're going to do it and then don't do it. Okay. I have a good feeling about you, Will.
Let's put it like this. I say what I do, man.
All right. I have a
And
feeling about that. Sure.
I appreciate that. And when I do purchase your book, do me a favor. Can you autograph it for me?
Of course, man. I gotta when you stopped the live, I want to find out where you were from in Long Island. I want to see how close we were.
Oh, Suffolk County.
Okay, whereabouts? You remember? I mean, well, you remember, but
Mastic,
okay,
originally, where I was born. I owned a house in Ridge.
okay,
I lived over in Aquabog in Riverhead at one point. Lived in West Hampton Beach. When I got out of the service, I rented a place over there. Wading River, I rented a house over
uh-huh.
there. What about you?
The place that I work for, we had a center in West Hampton Beach, and we actually moved it to Riverhead. So the center's in Riverhead now, and there's a couple of great sober houses in Mastic. I've visited a couple of sober houses. I'm from Nassau. I live in Merrick Belmore, and that's where I grew up too. Like different house, but that's where I grew up. So I've lived here all my life. But yeah, I'm all across Nassau and Suffolk with my job, all over the place. So
I had family that grew up in Rockville Center, Baldwin. Yeah,
yeah, that's the whole South Shore. That's the whole train line. Rockville Center, Baldwin, Freeport, Merrick, Fillmore. It's like same.
bingo.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely talk more for sure. For
I
sure.
look forward to it, man.
Yeah. And I
And
appreciate this. I really do. Thank you for having me on, man. This is great.
th- thank you so much. And Chelsea, thank you for the shout outs. I appreciate you. But all right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, man. Take it easy.